Okay, so I think at this point, everyone in the Owl House fandom can agree that Hunter is not what he appears. In fact, I think we can all agree that he's some kind of magical clone or something. This harkens back to the Hunter is a Grimwalker theory, which has been all over the fandom for a while now. I would be genuinely surprised if you were part of this fandom and haven't been exposed to it. I'm someone who doesn't get super immersed in fandoms anyway, and I've been exposed to it. In fact, I'm going to link you to my favorite iteration of the theory about Harish in the video, so you can head over and get a full description of how this theory is expected to pan out. If that's not something you're super interested in, though, let's just go over the basics real quick. Specifically, the theory goes that Hunter is something called a Grimwalker, a sort of magical, homunculus, golem-esque being. And we see a book which seems to contain a recipe for creating this creature in Belos' lab. And while there's more details in the book, out of the pages that we see, other than this, the details worth remembering for the purposes of this video are, one of the components in creating the Grimwalker is palisman wood. 2, a Grimwalker does start out as a baby and then grow normally to maturity, like any human or witch would. And 3, and this is the detail that convinced me that Hunter is almost definitely one of these things, Grimwalkers have red eyes, and Hunter has red eyes. The implication of this being that you could use a Grimwalker to recreate a person, but they would have a different biological makeup to the original, to some extent, the most obvious of those being red eyes. This harkens back to the theory that has also been bouncing around the fandom for a long time, that Emperor Belos is Philip Wittebane, the other human who at one point lived in Bonesborough. As the biggest stumbling block in the way of that theory has always been, how could Philip still be alive? Now we know that it's entirely possible that he's been using the Grimwalker spell to clone new bodies for himself, and then using body-switching magic to take over the body of the clone whenever his previous body is about to wear out. And proponents of the Hunter as a Grimwalker theory seem to think that this is what Belos intends to do to Hunter, that Hunter is his next body. And this is even supported by a detail of Belos' real face, the fact that he doesn't have red eyes, which seems like it would be contradictory to this theory, but if he is a Grimwalker that's possessed by another person via body switch magic, he would still have that original person's original eyes. That's how body change magic works. So the Grimwalker theory is the saving grace of the Belos is Philip theory. It seems to wrap everything up pretty nicely, save for a couple of random questions that people in the fandom have had about Belos if he is Philip. And it's actually those couple of extra remaining loose end questions that have me thinking that, while I do believe that Hunter is a Grimwalker, I don't believe that Belos is Philip. Ever since the idea that Belos and Philip might be the same person was introduced, people have been asking, well then, if Philip created the portal, why does Belos seem to need the portal? Why couldn't he just make another one? If he is Philip, why couldn't he just make another one? And if for whatever reason he did forget some of the details over time, if he is Philip, why wouldn't he know where he left his journal, which could be used to recreate the portal from scratch? Like, I've liked the Belos is Philip theory literally since we saw Philip. Literally since we heard that he existed in the first place, but I just can't get those questions out of my mind. Now, I was really hoping that episode 10 of season 2, the mid-season finale, would answer some of those questions, but unfortunately the only real lore bit that we got seemed to raise more questions and answer none of them. As we learned in that episode that Philip wasn't the only person who went through to the demon realm, that he took his brother along with him. Which is odd, because everything from Philip's language in the first entry in his journal to the description of the story of Philip given to us by Ida's mother seems to suggest that Philip came through alone. In fact, throughout all of the entries in Philip's journal that we've actually heard up to this point, he never mentions a traveling companion, let alone a brother. And the story we hear in episode 210 also suggests that someone else took Philip and his brother through intentionally. The conspiracy theorist guy in that episode who's telling the story suggests that they were lured in and taken advantage of by this person. But what if they sought the person out? Because again, if you go back to the way Philip was described by Ida's mother, as well as to the language that he used in his journal entries, Ida's mom flat out says that he fell through accidentally because of a leak of Titan's blood. And his language seems to support that. He found himself here. He didn't seek this place out. Nor does he mention being tricked into the demon realm. It really does seem like it was entirely an accident. And so that's the question that episode 210 raises. Why do there seem to be contradictory stories about Philip's time in the demon realm and how he got there? And based on the information that we have so far, I can only think of one satisfactory answer to that question. And that's that Philip went to the demon realm twice. The first time he fell through accidentally, learned about witch culture and magic, came to appreciate and understand it, used his knowledge of it, as well as his knowledge of science and technology, to create the portal, returned home, but the portal was shut by someone on the other side. So wanting to get back for one reason or another, he teamed up with his brother and sought out a means of returning intentionally from the human side, with his brother in tow. Which is interesting, because if you look at the image of the two brothers, something jumps out at you immediately if you assume that one of these two brothers has been to the demon realm before. Or at least it did to me. Do you see it? Do you see the little cardinal sitting on the shoulder of the brother in the background? You know, relative to where the two are positioned. Anyway, like looking at these two and keeping in mind that Philip is the one whose name we've heard before, the suggestion seems to be that the one in the foreground is Philip. That's the one that's implied to be most important by their placement in this image. But I don't think it is. I think the one in the background is Philip. And I think that cardinal is the same cardinal talisman that's taken a liking to Hunter. I think that Philip came back with his talisman, got his brother, tried to return and show him this wondrous place he had found. Because remember, even though Philip did see the danger of the demon realm, he did find it wondrous too. But then once they were there, his brother tried to exploit this place, which fits very well with the idea of appreciation versus appropriation and colonization, one of which is represented by Luce and the other by Belos. I think in that original dynamic between brothers, Philip was Luce to his brother, Belos. I think the reason that Belos, assuming that he is a clone who's passed down bodies for generations, doesn't know all the stuff that we would assume Philip should know, is because he's not Philip. He's Philip's brother. And Hunter is a Grimwalker clone of Philip himself. That for whatever reason, for whatever Belos has planned, he needs his brother to pull it off. That would explain everything, from the fact that the Cardinal took a liking to Hunter, recognizing him as Philip, to the fact that Hunter has an interest and an appreciation for wild magic. Something that, at least as far as this theory is concerned, Philip would have too. Maybe it's taken Belos this long to recreate Philip because Philip didn't want to use this Grimwalker magic on himself the way Belos did. Maybe he was content to exist as he was and experience the demon realm as he was, but Belos wanted more, trying to use the Grimwalker magic to create a version of himself that had witch traits, explaining why he has pointed witchy ears and also why his body seems unstable. And I definitely do think that Belos, regardless of whether or not this theory turns out to be true, is a Grimwalker himself. The weird scar across his face looks very barkish, and remember I mentioned that one of the components in a Grimwalker is talisman wood. Wood, bark. It seems to make sense. And that's not even bringing up the fact that if Belos really is part talisman, so to speak, that explains why he has to drink them to hold his unstable form. That doesn't explain why Hunter then also has witchy ears, but maybe Belos created him as a hybrid too, despite the fact that Philip himself wouldn't have wanted that. Or maybe he used something of his current self in the creation of Hunter, and that just came out as the result. Now, this doesn't mean that Belos doesn't want to take over Hunter's body. It's possible that he still does, but If he does, I think in this case it would be Philip's brother taking over Philip's body, more or less. But if left unattended, I think Hunter would eventually grow to be basically the same person that Philip was. Maybe that's even why Belos doesn't want him learning about wild magic, because that's the thing that Philip was interested in, and he's worried that'll bring more of Philip out of him. After all, if they are clones, if they don't have a family, then Belos has lied to Hunter about his origins. Remember, according to Belos, Hunter is his nephew, and their family was in some way destroyed by wild magic. If they're both Grimwalkers, though, that would have to be a lie. And Belos lied specifically about it being wild magic that destroyed their family to keep Hunter away from it for this reason. Obviously, there's not a lot to go on here yet regarding this. I could be entirely off base, but it would be really interesting if it turns out to be true. And it would explain not only why there are those discrepancies in the stories, but why it was necessary to introduce a second brother in the first place. It also fits with the show making it clearer and clearer that there's more crossover between the two realms than we initially thought. If this character returned to Earth and then went back to the demon realm, that fits with that thematically. I don't know. Again, I could be reading way too much into all of this. So, I leave it to you guys. What do you guys think of this theory? Do you think I've managed to answer some of the questions that the show has left dangling for us, or have I just made things more complicated? Let's get a discussion going in the comment section down below, and while you're down there, you might as well like the video, share it with anyone else you think would enjoy my content, subscribe. If you haven't, you can also check out links to my various social medias, as well as the many ways you can help out the channel. Those will be in the video description. But either way, this has been AJ22, and I will talk to you guys later.